Good morning, Grinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. Blender Ed, Blender HT, if you want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Thursday, December 8th. It's Thirsty Thursday. What are you thirsty about? It'll all be up to you, right? What we do throughout the course of the week, this show is pretty much sculpted by you in the YouTube chat. I see Wataz here early as usual. Good morning, Wataz, Adam Meisen, Bart B, Kickstart, Suki Singh. A minute left. Suki Singh's coming in pretty late. 10:59. What was Suki doing? I have no idea. Daniel Hutchings is here. Jay Willie. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Give me those thummy thumbs. Daniel Hutchings, Nerdy Tenor that played. He was off for on Saturday for MMA, so maybe you could type in a little about the late swap experience. I saw a lot of chatter on Twitter about MMA late swap stuff, which I agree with. Some of it I agree with, and some of it I don't agree with. For the large field stuff, it's not as dramatic as necessary, and we kind of talked about it that like in large field stuff, you pretty much need to find the optimal anyway, right? No matter what you're late swapping to or whatever, like whatever ends up being the optimal lineup, like that's all you need. I mean, whether or not you started with it or you finished with it, it doesn't affect you that much. Would you like to rescue lineups that have no chance at winning first place? Sure, but most of the EV as far as late swapping is going to be for that purpose, for rescuing min cashes. In 150 of your lineups. I think I talked about this on the Theory of DFS podcast with Neil. That like I'm now playing just the small field stuff. Okay, like the small field stuff. So the 555, the $200 three max, the $100 single entry, the qualifiers, I guess, right? Stuff like that. But like more geared towards like the 555. A lineup that I could rescue a min cash in the 555 is worth like what? How many in the $25 version of the large field contests? That's like 20. That's like what? 27 lineups. That's like saving 27 lineups in large field. And I don't even know if you're going to be able to save that many lineups if you play 150 of them by late swapping to min cash equity. So like in the grand scheme of things, in the large field contests, like most of your late swap is going to be to get a lineup that already has one loss in it to the cash line, get 5 wins, get 4 good wins in it. But in your overall perspective of large field play, most of your money comes in winning first place, right? So you could rescue all you want for 100 slates. If you don't win first place once, you're not going to be profitable regardless of how many min cashes you save. But in the 555, saving a min cash is a lot. And because you don't need the optimal, being able to swap out to a lower owned guide here and a higher variance fighter there, like it gives you more shots. It gives you more shots at winning first places. You don't need anywhere near the optimal lineup in the 555 typically. Look, the lineup that I won with 2 weeks ago for 30K, like had a losing fighter in it. Didn't even have the highest scoring fighter in the lineup. Didn't need it. Didn't actually need it. My lineup would have came in like 70th place in the large field, but it won the 555. So like late swap for those purposes, I think is immense. People that are downplaying that for the smaller field stuff, I don't know what they're not seeing. It's so much. It's so easy to figure out because there's so few lineups that you have to even look at or consider and go, what lineups am I competing against, and how do I build a different structure to those lineups that I can't win? So, like I mentioned 2 weeks ago about those Tercios lineups when he got 116 points and I don't have him, and I'm like, I can't have my lineups that look like Tercios lineups. And how many Tercios lineups are there? He's like 15% owned. So I go and I take a look at what these Tercios lineups look like, even with like spaces that, obviously because the late swap, it hasn't hasn't locked yet. So I don't know, 2 empty spots in people's lineups. And I go, no, they have to they have to play some 7K underdog in these lineups. Right. So it's like, okay, well, I in the lineups that I'm trying to beat those lineups, I can't have Sherman, I can't have Goodalaba on that slate. And then swapping out from there and go, okay, how do I make my construction different? How do I swap off of one of these two guys to another 7K guy? In the large field stuff, like you have to go through way too many lineups to figure that out. And even if you do, like you're not going to get the optimal anyway because you don't have the top scoring fighter in your lineup. So all you're really doing is still rescuing min caches at that point. But if you're going to play the large field stuff just to build the optimal lineup, I think, is there EV to be gained with late swap? Absolutely. But can you play the large field stuff and just lock it in and forget about it and just watch the card? I think so. I don't think you're losing that much. I don't think so, at least. But I mean, that's what I want to hear from Nerdy Tenor on his experience in doing so. Daniel Hutchings says, I think for large field, late swap is mostly going to be about saving lineups and getting more min caches. Well, there you go. But it's going to be hard to do unless you have something automated. Right. Yeah. For 150 lineups, yeah. I mean, I'm doing it manually for 8 lineups, and it's a pain in the ass. Right. I'm sitting on the couch every 20 minutes. What fight is coming up next? What information do I know? And I talked about it last week on the Friday MMA show that you could watch, right? The pregame show from last Friday, and go, what game are you playing? Looking at the lineup, what game am I playing? Am I playing min cash game? Am I playing win first place game? And you have to determine that and then build your lineups accordingly. And then, of course, I back into, like, I had eight lineups yesterday, last week, that I saved 3 of them. They didn't win first. They didn't win. But I saved 3 lineups, which for like a $555 or a $200 3 max, to get from $200 to $400 rather than 0, or to get from $555 from 0 to 1,000 is a lot. Right? Like, I got a loss in this lineup. Okay, let me switch to Angela Hill. Let me switch to Eric Anders. Let me switch to the underdogs that have lower ceilings and are in matchups that are more likely to go to distance. Lower variance fighters. And it just turns out that they scored well also. So that helped me. Right? So you're switching to that. And then on the other lineups where I have a shot, maybe I have a shot at winning, then that's the line by Pavlovich. Right? Otherwise, I don't. I already have a loss or 2 in my lineup. So like, what's the 144 going to really do for me? I mean, I'm not going to win first. I just want to get to the cash line as easy as possible. Daniel says, if you look at my lineups in the main GPP from last weekend, you'll find I had a bunch of dupes with myself, and this was due to late swap. So you ended up swapping. Oh, okay. But truthfully, did you have dupes? See, it looks like you have dupes in lineups that didn't have a shot at first place. Like that's really the key. Like I see, like you said, Thompson, Pavlovich, Levy, Pierce, Rojo, Delidze. Yeah, because Rojo was in an early fight, right? So Rojo was in like I think the second fight. So Rojo lost. So you had duping to come in first place sucks, right? But duping, like, maybe the best option to rescue your lineups, right? Right, he says Marcelo lost it, right? So once Rojo loses, all your lineups with Rojo in it, your goal is to just, how do I min cash? But you may have, like in a 150 set, maybe you have 20 lineups that have Rojo in it only. And none of the first fight, right? You didn't have Jaregui in it, right? And now you're sitting there before the third fight with 1 loss and 5 spots in your lineup. Well, you probably should be swapping all of those Rojo lineups to min cash style lineups, which means you're probably going to dupe yourself, which is perfectly fine at the min cash line, right? Because you have all those spots there. Right? I mean, like you got 1,000, 2,000 spots that are min cashing. So who cares if you duped, right? It's only towards the top of the payout structure do you care about duplication. So yeah, I could see even if you're automating it, that'll just change all of those lineups into ones. Then they may all look the same. They may be the same exact lineup. That may be fine. You run a little train. You try to catch the train all at once. But yeah, but in large field, you're mostly doing that. Hey, truthfully, in small field, you're mostly doing that also. It's very hard to get like the perfect lineup. As you're 5 fights in, you may not have any lineups that are live for first. That's what it was for me this past week. I played a lot of Rojo and I played a lot of Valdez. Second fight, third fight, both underdogs. They both lost. 3 out of my 8 lineups had Jauregui, who you needed. So I had 3 Jauregui lineups. So those are like I'm playing for first after the first fight. The other ones, I don't know. I don't think I am. And then Rojo loses, and I have Rojo. Out of my 3 Jauregui lineups, I have Rojo Valdez in one, I have Rojo in another, and I have Valdez in another. So after the third fight, even my Jauregui lineups have 1 loss or 2 losses in it. So those lineups aren't playing for first place. So now all I'm doing is just now that's why I have a lot of Kevin Holland. That's why I have a lot of Eric and I have Anders and Hill. Right? I switched to a lot of Hill. Okay, got to move down to Hill. Get me an 80-point decision. That's fine with me. Right? But I was able to save 2 out of my 8 lineups. That would, if I left alone, would have not cashed at all. Because I moved off of Tuivasa. I moved Ty Tuivasa out and Eric Anders in. I moved some mid-range guy down to Hill at 7,900, and then I bumped up, like, instead of playing Pavlovich, I got all the way up to like Dos Anjos with that 600. Like, let me just virtually guarantee myself a win there. So I had a lot of Dos Anjos, Pierce, Nicolau style lineups with Anders and Hill. I mean, and they did well. And save it. I mean, this is the type of stuff you could be doing in NBA and NFL, and I mean, this is what you should be doing in general. Daniel says someone also pointed to me that I had some lineups with canceled fighters in it. And just because those lineups had exactly $0 equity in my process, just swapped randomly in those cases. Okay. Right. So probably like when you're swapping later in the slate and you have like 4 losses in there, like I don't think it matters. Like 2 big wins ain't going to get you to the cash line with 4 losses in it. Right. He has an example lineup. Cortez, Jacasey, Elkins, Price, Rojo, Hermanson. Yeah. I get it. Strawface 23 says, yesterday's show was arguably one of the most valuable shows Blender has ever had. If anyone is new here, I highly suggest after the show, go back and watch Rochester. Was it a good show? I yelled at people for like an hour. Tough love. Sometimes you got to yell at people. Because I don't get it. It's more of a frustration. I don't get how I could do this show every single day and I see the same names asking the same questions a year or 2 later. Like I'm watching and I go like, what are you doing with yourself? I don't get it. I am always in a constant state of learning. Always. I don't know it all. I can make hypotheses. I could look into things. I could do some trial and error. I could study winning players and see, are there things that I believe that would be good play that they're doing or they're doing less of or more of or something, and just constantly thinking about, well, if this applies to this, how does it apply to that? If it doesn't apply to this, how does it not apply to that? So when people are saying like, oh, MMA, late swap MMA doesn't matter. Like, it can't not matter. Okay? It's a simple concept of game theory. The more information you have, the closer to optimal you can make your decisions. Like, end of story. It's the fundamental theorem of poker. Did you play your hand in a way where it would be optimal if you saw your opponent's cards? The answer is yes. Then why wouldn't you want to see your opponent's cards or want to know what comes out on the turn or something? It's the same thing in DFS. Maybe we're arguing the scale of how much of an edge that provides, but to say that it means nothing that would be wrong. It has to mean something. Right? I was trying to explain in the Blender's Game Theory channel, for instance, which you could get if you're a RotoGrinders premium member. You could ask anything you want there. So sign up for RotoGrinders, click on the link in the description, get $10 off your first month. But someone asked me there about NBA late swap, like what happens if you late swap and you already picked this player or whatever, and I'm like, get back to basics. Like why is there an edge for a late swap? It's simply because you have more information. That's it. That's the number one thing. So like, how many times should you swap throughout an NBA night? I go optimally after like every second. Optimally after every second. Every time the score changes. That's when you should be swapping. Now, how much of an effect every bucket? Probably not necessary, but that means you have more information. At 7:15 on this slate coming up, this 3-game slate, we have a 7:30 game, an 8:30 game, a 10 o'clock game. The first game locks at 7:30, which means you could change the other 2 games and change your lineups. At 7:45 or whenever the tip-off is, right? Someone on Miami will score, right? Jimmy Butler scores a bucket. Well, that's more information than you had 15 minutes ago. He now has 2 points. How does that affect the lineups that you play? You'll also know all the ownership of all the Clippers and all the Heat. Now that if Jimmy Butler is 28% owned instead of you thought was going to be 18% owned, how does that affect your decisions? Now that you know that information, is there anything that you want to change in your lineups? And as the game goes on, oh, this guy gets a rebound, this guy gets a foul, this guy subs out, whatever. It's just more and more information to allow you to continually make decisions. You have decisions to make. If there's no late swap, you'd just be sitting there, hands off the wheel. There's nothing you could do. It doesn't matter what happens. But sequentially, it's not a simultaneous game anymore. If it was no late swap, it would just be a simultaneous game. Everyone makes all their decisions simultaneous at once, and everything's done. It's become a sequential game. So if at halftimes, someone is totally snowflaking at 42% ownership, how does that affect the lineups that you have that you could swap different players in and out of? Scale that to any way you want, as little or as big as you want. So you could swap every 5 minutes to maximize for the information that you already have, especially when a lot of the field isn't doing anything. They're like, nope, our lineups look the same way that they are as if we didn't know any ownership or any scoring. Right? They look like as it was at 7:30. But you have the option to now change your lineups. You know halftime scores. You know ownership. You know stuff that's going on. I'm not saying like, there's an injury in the new starting lineup. Some guy's out in one of the later games. I'm talking about we know information from the first game right now. How much is it worth swapping? That's a different story. How much, how to quantify that. But to say it doesn't matter at all, that's wrong. That's just simply incorrect. So like when we're talking about the late swap in MMA for large field, does it matter? Yes, of course it matters. But does it matter to the extent in which you shouldn't play the slate at all unless you could late swap 150 lineups in large field? Maybe not. You may not be giving up as much edge as originally intended. It's a lot of saving min cashes. But as far as winning first place, probably not that much. But it's not zero effect. Daniel Hudgens says, if late swap doesn't matter, I just wasted 3 days of my life. The fact that it took you 3 days, only 3 days to build whatever the hell, whatever super AI, the robots, Skynet, you had Skynet put together, the Terminator is helping you out, putting together how to do all those swaps. I'm just doing it manually. I just do it conceptually manually. I'm 8 lineups. I'm just being an 8 lineup guy now. 6 to 8 lineups. I mean, for the UFC card coming up, I have a whole bunch of 555 tickets. So I got 4 555 tickets. So I could have 4 of those lineups. I could have the $200, the $100. Then I have the amalgamation of the 55 and the 40 and the 12 all put together. Daniel says from what he saw the last slate, not many players are trying to figure out swaps on the main GPPs. Either they're not trying to figure out or they don't have a process yet. I know some 150 man. I've talked to one or two that they have a process. But I guess maybe it's hard to tell if they're swapping or not because how would you know? The next fight locks and bing, and then you see like, you sure what people started with? I don't know. But to say there's no effect, of course there's an effect. Now, like an NFL showdown, obviously there's no late, there's no nothing. That is a simultaneous game. But to think that late swap is only for like an NBA, like, oh, we got to see what the Spurs lineup is going to be. Like, no, it's like you know what's in other people's lineups, and you could think of it in the same way. To some extent, there's a lot more. Obviously, there's a lot more options on an NBA slate or an NFL slate or something like that. So it's quite possible that the highest scoring player or whatever at 2% on may not even be in the winning lineup. It's not like MMA where that guy's probably going to be in the winning lineup. So like you could think the same way. Let's say on tonight's slate you fade Keldon, or let's say who's in the early game. Miami, Clippers. Let's say Tyler Hero or Jimmy Butler. Let's say at halftime, Jimmy Butler's already put up like 38 fantasy points. And you don't have him. Well, what do you play? Now, you could do the same thing that we talked about with MMA. What do you play? You're playing a large field GPP, and you don't have Jimmy Butler, who's most likely going to put up a lot of, I mean, he's at 38 at the half. You're probably going to need him to win. And you don't have him in your lineup, in one of your lineups. You should be swapping out your lineup to like try to min cash as much as possible. You're not competing for first place anymore. What game are you playing? You're playing min cash game now. Then in your Jimmy Butler lineups at the half of this game, with the Rockets Spurs game coming up, though now you're playing a win in those lineups. So you're gonna late swap one set of your non-Jimmy Butler lineups to like safe lineups. Like, can I just get right up to the cash line? That's all I need. Then your Jimmy Butler lineups, now it's like, how do I add more variance so I could leapfrog even more people? People think the other way. People think too much of the other way. Oh, I don't have Butler. I got to get really weird. Like, no, that top 5% of the payout curve, that hockey blade, that's unavailable to you. You don't have the player that enough people have that to get in that range anyway. So don't try to even bother getting there. Just try to get to the start of the handle of the hockey stick. Right. Daniel says NBA late swap is conceptually the same, but much more difficult in practice because the number of opponent combos is astronomically larger. Right. I said there's a lot more options. And also, you don't necessarily need the optimal to win. Right? Maybe on a 3-game slate, but on like a normal size 10-game NBA slate, there are plenty of 2% on guys that put up a lot of points that you may not need to win the GPP. But in the smaller, like MMA, small field golf type of thing, yeah, you're gonna need the winner. You're probably gonna need the winner. James Aguirre says PMR factors into it as well. If you have Butler with more PMR than other Butler lineups, you could just plug in the highest projections at that point. Not necessarily. You don't know what players. Doesn't matter about PMR. Right. They're not right. Just like Daniel brings up, they're not evenly distributed throughout the game. You don't necessarily have to go by PMR. If you have Butler with more PMR than other Butler lineups, but you don't know what players you're sharing. You don't know anything. I would do the opposite. That's the thing that you're doing the opposite of what's optimal. If you have the highest Butler lineup, what should you be doing? You should be adding variance to your lineups. You're competing for first place. People do it the other way. Now, if you want to block, you have to be absolutely and unequivocally sure that you're blocking in order to do that. Other than that, I'd much rather take on more leverage and give myself even more shots to beat out other people. Because if you're wrong about blocking, you've literally blocked yourself out of first place. Okay? People think the opposite. It's not the opposite. When you're behind and you cannot win first place, you should be playing the highest projected lineup. Okay? But you need both those characteristics. Okay? That you have no shot at first place, that you're not playing for first. You're not playing for 10th. You're not playing for anything close to the top 1%. Most people think, oh, I got to get there. I got to make up ground. Yeah, of course, you still got to make up. Yes, you do have to make up ground, but you're never going to get to the top 1%. So taking on so much more risk now, like how much more risk should you be taking on? You just have to get up to the cash line. That's it. So taking out all your 40% owned players in NBA and putting 2% in, like, you shouldn't be doing that. Be like, oh, I don't have Butler. Okay, let me just jam in as many projection points as possible and get right to that cash line, and then I'm good. I don't have to get anything past there. Who cares about the rest of the payout structure? It doesn't matter anymore to you. Now, once you're at the top of the payout structure, once you're competing at the top, it's more important to be different than it is to be the same, unless you're absolutely sure that you're blocking other people behind you. And if you're sitting there with you only have 3 players going in this slate, and there's 5 empty slots. Good luck figuring out who your opponents have. Good luck. You have 3 other games. I mean, this is a 3-game slate. Imagine we're talking about a 10-game slate. Like, you don't know. You don't know what most of these lineups even look like. You go, well, this guy's going to be more chalky than that guy's going to be more chalky. And then the next thing that happens is that you play too safe. You lower your variance, and you end up sharing too many players. Even though you have like 1 extra spot or something like that, you're sharing too many players with people competing against you. And one person has some 4% owned guy that in the later game puts up 60 points, and you're dead. They pass you, and now they're blocking you. And you're looking at your lineup going, well, I just pressed the best projected lineup and said, yeah. And now you're blocked. Wouldn't have been better if you like sacrifice 2 or 3 points in projection and now have a 4v4 off of so many other lineups that no one shares all 4 of those players. They'll share 1, they'll share 2, but they won't share all 4. But once you start jamming in all the chalk, like if one other player's differential goes past you, you've now blocked yourself out of first place. So truthfully, mathematically, the closer you are playing to first place, the more variance you should be adding to your lineup, because you're playing for first. You're not playing to make sure you come in 8th. Now, if that's your goal, to make sure you come in 8th at least, then fine. Play all the chalk at that point. But other than that, you should be playing for first and go, okay, yeah, I got this guy in, I got that guy in, but how could I still be different? Because there are going to be plenty of, in this example, Butler lineups that have 2 other chalk pieces in it also. And another differentiated piece here, and another differentiated piece there. I'd rather be a 3v3 or a 4v4 off of a lot of those lineups than a 1v1. Unless you're perfect, right? That's why I said, unless you know for sure that you're that you could block as many other people as possible without getting blocked yourself. Now, in the first game, let's say in the first game you have a 1% owned guy that goes off for 90. Obviously, it's an exaggeration. The likelihood of seeing your opponents have all the chalk with that one is very low. So at that point, like, you could be quite sure that you're the only person with that 90.1%er that you could just block everyone. Just basically swap out, run the projections, and just go, give me the chalkiest lineup with the rest of the spots. And now you're blocking everyone. Absolutely. But you're never going to be you're rarely ever going to be in that situation. You're going to be playing a 32% owned guy that puts up 62. You go, okay, so you're still competing. A third of the lineups in the contest still have that player in it. So how do I block 5,000 lineups? Good luck. Most likely, if you're jamming in the top projected lineup from that point, you're going to be overlapped with so many more of those 5,000 lineups, which is great when you're ahead. But how do you block all 5,000? You can't. One player that you don't have in the later game goes for, is 4,800 and goes for 42 points. And you have some other $4,800 player. Well, now that lineup and the 80 other people that have that player are now blocking you. So the more that you're playing for first place, we do this before the slate begins. Okay? Don't change what you're going to do. People think differently. Once all of a sudden the slate locks, they think the game flips on its head. What are you doing before lock for GPPs? I'm building a lineup that has high enough projection and low enough ownership. Not just playing your cat. You're not going in going, I'm just going to play the cash lineup. I'm going to go to lineup HQ. I'm going to put in 2 zeros, press the button, right? 263.24 based on our current projections right now. This is the cash lineup, right? All these high owned players, high median values. There you go. Would you do this at 7:30? Would you say, I'm playing large, I'm trying to play for $100,000, try to beat 50,000 lineups, and I'm going to play this? Of course not. You'd be go like, why the hell are you playing the cash lineup in GPP? It doesn't have enough leverage. You're sharing too many points with too many people, right? But how come, like, it seems like, oh, well, if Kevin Porter puts up a great game, like, now it's perfectly fine to just jam the optimal in. At that point, it's like, oh, I already got a good guy. Let me just play all the chalk. Like, dude, you don't do that before the slate. So why are you doing it after the slate? Even after the slate begins with late swap, you still want to have leverage in your lineup to win first place. You still need to have points that your opponents that don't have. And there are so many combinations that are out against you that you still want to share the least amount of combinations with other people that have that same player in their lineup. And especially in large field, good luck. You have Kevin Porter and 30% of the field has Kevin Porter. And it's like, okay, I have the same PMR as 360 other lineups that all have 4 spots empty of different salary configurations. Good luck figuring out what all 360 lineups have. You're not going to be able to. In a small field contest, you may be competing with 3 lineups. And then that's easy. I can click through all 3 and go, okay, they most likely have X, Y, and Z. This one probably has X, Y. This one paid up at center, so most likely has that. Then you could go, okay, what's the best way to go from here? And maybe playing the highest projected lineup blocks all 3 of those lineups easily and go, I'm good. Move on. Or maybe you find that you can't. So you go, I'm going to get slightly different here. So I'm not. These 3 lineups all have the same 2 players. So maybe I pivot off of one of them and create a 3v3 versus a 2v2. As long as I'm not giving up much projection to do so. You're doing the same thing even after the slate locks. It's the same concepts. How do you win first place in a GPP? By increasing the variance of your lineup. This is stuff out of Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. theoryofdfs.com. Get the fundamentals masterclass, the 15-hour I have 2 courses, right? How to think like a professional DFS player and how to apply profitable DFS strategies for advanced players. That comes with the Excel tools. These are fundamental concepts of game theory. Like, it doesn't change. Like, oh, the slate locks, and now all of a sudden the concepts are reversed now. No, they're still exactly the same. In order to win first place, you want as much leverage as possible that you need to beat out your opponents. And now, as the slate goes on, and you see scores and ownership, you could better adjust to that. You could better gauge it. You're more accurate now. But so many people are like, "Oh, I'm up, so I'm going to jam in chalk to block people," and then they come in 12th place. They go, "Okay, 12th place ain't that bad. I was close, but I got X, Y." And it's like, dude, you would have probably been better off, like, not jamming in the chalk at that point. Finding a way to be different. Yeah, you could have easily come in 150 place instead of 12th. They gave you more shot at first place. And then when you're all the way behind, and you have a snowflake in your lineup, and you're like, I have no shot at first place, people just like either give up, right? Either one, they just, I'm not going to swap at all. I'm just going to let myself come in dead last. Or they swap onto like the most risky plays possible. And they make their whole lineup full of risky stuff. Going, maybe I could rescue myself by getting off of this chalk and getting off of that chalk and getting off of that chalk. It's like, dude, how do you, your lineup is now projected like 25 points lower than everyone else's. How do you ever expect to get up to the cash line? Because you're not competing against anything else other than the cash line. So you might as well at that point just jam in a cash lineup. Your goal is a cash line, and jam in a cash lineup. But people think the opposite. Would benefit to me. Anything else in the YouTube chat before get out of here for today? This is what we talk about. And then, I had to go through the YouTube chat. We could have talked about basketball. We have the NFL Showdown slate, right? We got NFL pre-lock show later tonight. Got NBA with Grinders Live. Are they doing Grinders Live? I don't know. No, they probably do a crunch time. But whatever. We got NBA stuff. Got the Swolecast coming up next. I think they're doing a show at noon. Scores and Odds stuff on the Scores and Odds YouTube channel with all the betting picks and stuff. You could subscribe there. Got an MMA Ground and Pound podcast recording tonight. That's for premium members. So sign up for RotoGrinders Combo Premium. Be me, Mike, and Liam breaking down the fights for UFC 282. Then I'll be talking about MMA a little tomorrow for a little free show. Fighting Fridays. So hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. It helps us out. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. And I will see you tomorrow. Talking about the UFC 282 slate. Talking about strategies. Maybe some late swap stuff for that also. So come and join me as I answer your DFS strategy questions. I'll at least try to. I try to as honestly as possible. I'll give you the real deal. I give you the real answers here. Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern, on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.